Our first question asks, what is the main idea of the passage? We know that we oftentimes will find the main idea in the very beginning of a passage or close to the end. So if we're looking for the passage, main idea here, we can read those first few sentences. Who earned the title of Mother of Blues? That will be Ma Rainey, the first great African American blues singer. So this right here, I'm going to highlight it for us. That's going to be our main idea. So number one, Ma Rainey was the first great blues singer. Once we identify our main idea, we need to find supporting details. So we should be asking ourselves, okay, if Ma Rainey is the first great African American blues singer, what made her so great? What's the proof that she was the first great blues singer? So if we look through, her career began when she was 14 years old in a local talent show in Georgia. Well, if I think to myself, okay, do most great singers start when they're 14? Well, yeah, many do start when they're a teenager. So that could be one supporting detail. So I'm going to highlight that supporting detail with an orange highlighter. So her career began when she was 14 years old. It's not very common that 14-year-olds become, professional singers and start a career. Also, we want to think to ourselves, let's continue looking. So 4 years later, she married Pa Rainey. So getting married, did that make her a famous blues singer? Not really. But if we continue reading, we can see that they performed a song and dance act together. So that could be another example of a supporting detail that she was the first great blues singer, is that her and her husband worked together to create their own act. And then let's continue reading. They traveled and performed throughout the South. Okay. In 1923, she made her first recording. So beginning to record music and not just to play music is part of becoming famous and becoming considered one of the greats of a particular genre of music. So I'm going to highlight that. She made her first recording in 1923. Something else that I might find as being evidence that she was a great blues singer is that she recorded about 100 songs. That's quite a few, right? Let's see. Keep reading. She performed with many notable jazz musicians during her career. So that could be a possibility of a supporting detail that she was a great blues singer. So performing with many notable musicians. And the last thing I take a look at is her singing influenced many younger blues singers. So the fact that she became an inspiration for future singers is definitely a sign that she was a great blues singer. So these are just possibilities. Now you can see as we look down at my completed chart that these are just some of the things we talked about. That she began her career when she was 14. That she performed with her husband. That she began making her first recordings in 1923, and lastly, she was influencing younger singers. Hopefully you took a look and you were able to see how well you did compared to the answers that I have here. Feel free to leave any questions if there were things that you weren't sure of or that you found confusing. Here are the answers to our vocabulary review on page 213. Number 1. Appreciate means to think highly of. Slavery is the condition of being owned by another person and being made to work without wages. Religious is being devoted to religion. Choir is a group of singers who sing together, often in a church service. And teenager is a person in his or her teens. We talked about that being from ages 13 to 19. Now at the bottom we had to match the vocab word that completed the sentence. So let's take a look. We have our matches here. So we have released, matches with published. Barber matches to a hair cutter. Appreciate means to value or be appreciative or thankful for. A choir is a group of singers. And religious is being spiritual. So those are our answers. Make sure you check over yours and make sure that they match. We have a review of our troublesome verbs. Remember, we were focusing on mostly lay and lie, which are the two that are most commonly confused. Lay meaning to put or place, and lie meaning to rest or recline. So let's take a look at our answers. For that top section, we have number 1, A teenage girl sat with the choir. So we need the past tense of sit. And we know that that's sat. So if we go up to sit and we go over to past tense, we know that the word should be sat. Number 2, she has lay her hand over her heart. So we need the past participle. So again, finding lay, and then we're going to go over to the past participle, which is right here. So we have has, have, or had. They tell us it should be has, and then our verb should be laid. Number 3, the choir director let her join. So again, using our chart, let, if we find the past tense, is also let. It does not change. Number 4, the music never leave her head, past tense. So leave, using our chart, past tense is left. Number 5, when she set her suitcase down in Chicago, Mahalia knew she was home. So past tense of set, if we find set to put something somewhere, the past tense is also set. It does not change. Mahalia's father had let her follow her dream. Finding that past participle, we have our helping verb had. So let's find let, and we see that let, past tense is let, past participle is let. It stays the same. At the bottom, we had to choose the correct verb to complete the sentence. I set a CD on the counter because we're putting it or placing it down. Number 8, will you let me pay for it? Number 9, my parents have already left the store. Number 10, after dinner, we sat down and listened to the CD. Number 11, Tom has lain down on the floor. It is lain because if we look at the top, remember, we are resting or reclining. So that's going to be lain. And then lastly, number 12, we have Fiona laid a log on the fire. First of all, we should know lied is not a word, so that didn't make sense. But if we were using our chart, once again, laid, she is putting or placing that log on the fire. So once again, please check your answers and make any corrections where needed. So our final review for today is our vocabulary skill of finding antonyms or opposites. So we had to read this passage and then answer each question. So number 1 asks us to find the antonym for the word released. So released was one of our vocabulary words, and we said that that means to be published or to be let go of. So the opposite of letting go of something would be to hold on to it. So the opposite or antonym of released would be enslaved, because released would be the opposite of enslaved. Now, if you're asking to yourself, I didn't see that. If we look at our passage right here, I'm going to use my highlighter. So slaves express their hope of being released and not enslaved. So showing that those two are opposites there. Number 2, find the antonym for appreciated. How does the antonym help us to define appreciated? Again, appreciate is another one of our vocabulary words. Appreciate is to have value, for something to be important. So again, the antonym would be to neglect, right? Appreciate is the opposite of neglect. So if we find in our passage, after slavery ended, spirituals were neglected because they reminded people of something that they had wanted to forget. But time passed and spirituals came to be appreciated for their message and music. So they're telling us first that the spirituals were neglected. They wanted to forget them so they could forget those bad times. But then time passed and they realized that spirituals should be appreciated. So neglected and appreciated are our antonyms here. They're opposites. Taking a look at number 3. Number 3 says, in the passage, the word spiritual means a religious song. Spiritual also means being interested in the belief or worship of God or gods. So we're looking for an antonym for the second meaning of spiritual. So if the first meaning is a religious song, the second meaning is interested in the belief and worship of God. So we're looking for what's the opposite of that, of not believing. So if we look back into our passage, let's see if we see anything to help us with that. And if you look, we don't have a word in the passage. So that's when we need to think of a word ourselves. And they even suggested, if we go back up here, going to a thesaurus. A thesaurus can be a book where you can find an antonym if you're stuck. So maybe unbelieving is a word that you came up with. Maybe there's another word that you came up with. And if you did, make sure you drop it in our discussion. What was a word that you thought of that was an antonym for someone that was spiritual? Next one, number 4. In this passage, the word slavery means the condition of being owned by another person and being made to work without wages. What is the antonym of slavery? So once again, we're going to start with our passage to see if we can find any clues as to what might be an antonym here. So we're looking at spirituals, singing spirituals, express their hope of being released. All right, so if we know if slavery is being forced to work and being owned by someone, though we don't have a word here, there's probably a word that came to your mind because most slaves had a hope of one day being free. So maybe that word freedom came to your mind. And again, you can always go to a thesaurus if you're not sure. Now lastly, they ask you to write down a word from the passage and then find its antonym. Then write a sentence or sentences using your original word and your antonym. Now these are just examples. You did not have to use these. So they give the example of hope and despair. So their sentence was, I hope to get a new radio, but I despair of ever saving enough money to buy one. So what were your antonym pairs that you came up with?